welcome to today's press conference on Ogonize, Yasunize, and Depollute for Restoration and Dignity. The campaign, Ogonize and Yasunize, is inspired by the Ogoni people's fights in Nigeria and Ecuador's Yasunize initiative to keep the oil in the ground, to protect incredible rainforests, and to make the big corporations take responsibility for their mess. To Depollute is the global push to clean up polluted areas, ensuring that the people who live there are treated with respect and dignity. These are not just separate ideas. They are all connected. They are talking about taking climate change and the fight and fighting for climate justice. We do have 4 speakers, but we're still expecting that the other 2 will be here before the end of this meeting. To my left, we have Olamide Martins, who works with Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. And then we have Nemo Bassi, who is the Executive Director of Health of Mother Earth Foundation. I'll start with Nemo. Please, can you tell us about the Yasunize and Ogonize campaign and how they align with the Climate Corp, and how can the Ogoni struggle help other movements like the fights against ECOP in the south, in the eastern part of Africa, and other campaigns? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kome. I believe the issues of discussing this.
Sorry.
Now, when we speak of Ogonize and Yasunize, we are defining what it means to take real climate action, learning from the actions and the struggles of the Ogoni people in Nigeria and the people of Ecuador in Yasuni Block 43 ITT. The Ogoni people in 1993 expelled Shell from their territory. And for 32 years, the giant oil company Shell and the Nigerian government have been unable to reopen those oil wells. That is real climate action. Because climate action is about keeping fossil fuels from releasing carbon into the atmosphere, and that means keeping the fossils in the ground. This is the core of what the Conference of Parties on Climate Change ought to be talking about. But for 30 years, they're struggling, not to mention keeping fossils in the ground. They talk about phasing down to phase down fossils, and now to have a transition from fossils in transportation. You know, all the false solution. The real solution is to Yasunize the world and to Ogonize the world. And now, relating to the question that Kome just asked about what implication does this have for other struggles in other parts of the world, including the East African crude oil pipeline that is supposed to go from Uganda to Tonga in Tanzania. Now, to Yasunize and to Ogonize tells the moral story that community people, grassroots activism, can really lead in climate action. And this is because in August 2023, the people of Ecuador, 60% of the people who voted for leaving the oil in the ground in Yasuni. And so, in a referendum in Ecuador, which means that in all the nations of the world, in Uganda, in Namibia, Senegal, Brazil, everywhere, people whose areas are threatened by fossil fuel extraction can stand to demand that the fossils should be left in the ground. Same thing regarding Nigeria. The Ogoni people in 1990 presented a charter of demands to the Nigerian government. But rather than carrying out those demands, rather than respecting the demands, the area was militarized. And the people rose up in 1993 to say no more. And they expelled Shell. And today the struggle is that the government and the oil companies want to reopen those oil wells. And we're saying, with the Ogoni people, it's time to Ogonize. That means learn from the Ogoni struggle, and to Yasunize, learn from the Ecuadorian struggle, and make this global. So it's really a template for globalizing the struggle to keep fossils in the ground.
Thank you very much, Nemo, and welcome, Kling. Thank you. So, thank you. So I would allow you a few seconds to take a breather while I go over to Martins.
Thank you.
Martins, can you tell how can Yasunize and Ogonize, as well as Depollute, this campaign, how can it hold the polluters accountable?
Well, I think it's very clear that if we'll upscale this struggle, it's going to provide for us the evidence that we need. Many a times when we come to negotiation rooms like this, there's always a question of evidence. And if we attempt to adopt this organization struggle and the Yasunize struggle, what this means basically is that we now have the template that details the struggles and how these struggles can provide the evidence for us to be able to demand for commensurate compensation. And many a times when we look at the policy direction of the state, they are totally at variance with the expectation of people from the frontline communities. But now we have an organic struggle. We have a people-centered struggle that provides detailed expectation from the frontline. And of course, this is expected to influence very, very positively the direction at which the government will respond. And many a times, we also look at, how sincere the policies of government are. When you depollute, when you organize, when you Yasunize, it gives you, a democratic policy that speaks directly to the concerns of the people. And I've always mentioned that the primary duty of government is social welfare. Anything outside that is secondary. Maybe money can come later, but protect the people. Now you have a template that can be upscaled. Now when you adopt this template, and then when you advance the demands in this template, what that tells you is, of course, government policy will begin to addressing them. And I think it's also very crucial because there's always a big question about how can Africa or how can the people of Yasuni become that which can now be upscaled in the global context, when monies are becoming primary in the discussion. Yes, money is good, but then what is more important is the life and livelihood of people. Why they otherwise will give you employment and make you smile to the bank. When you Yasunize and when you Ogonize, you protect your livelihood. And you and I know the difference between employment and livelihood. Why employment will make you have money, livelihood will preserve your culture, will maintain your identity, and will, have you become that which you are actually supposed to become, not somebody determining the extent to which you flourish or otherwise. So I think it's a template that can be upscaled, and we don't have any other duty than to advance this struggle in the interest of those who have been denied expressions.
Thank you very much. So I'll come over to you, Kling. So can you tell us what are some of the key environmental challenges in your region, and what hope do you have in Belém? In this cup?
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I'm Kleng Hulve. I'm the Secretary General of AGHAM, Advocates of Science and Technology for the People in the Philippines, and I'm also the Regional Coordinator of Oil Watch Southeast Asia. So for the question regarding what are the major environmental challenges that we face in Southeast Asia, aside from the rising sea levels and the crazier, more intense typhoons, super typhoons, etc. We're also facing environmental plunder, climate crisis, and militarism. So let's break it down. In terms of environmental plunder, there's still continuing oil, gas expansion, and extractivism in Southeast Asia, fueling the climate crisis. And much of Southeast Asia still depends on dirty energy, such as oil, coal, and gas. And there is this trend that same corporations in dirty energy are also in renewable energy, and they are benefiting from the transition with the government incentives in them. In the name of just transition, quote-unquote just transition, because it's not just what's happening in Southeast Asia, there's the rush to mine green minerals used to power electric vehicles, but it even puts more pressure to communities already ravaged by mining and other environmentally destructive projects, such as the Kachin people in Myanmar and also the West Kalimantan people in Indonesia. And the false climate solutions are also here in Southeast Asia, with one of the buzzword is the carbon capture and storage in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Timor-Leste, which is not a very brilliant idea because you have natural forests, which are carbon sinks, but you decide to strip them off and mine minerals from it. There are also mega dams, large solar farms that are controlled by big corporations. And what do? These projects are nothing but climate imperialists' excuses to continue their business-as-usual extraction of and overproduction for profit with zero regard for the people and the environment. And as the people of Southeast Asia, we don't see this, take this sitting down. So the people are resisting and we are rising. So communities demand the control of their lands and natural resources. But this is met with heavy militarization and attacks on environmental and land defenders. In the Philippines, for example, where I come from, it has become one of the deadliest, actually the deadliest country in Asia for land and environmental defenders. And there is also occupation of lands in Indonesia, in the resource-rich West Papua, continuing military junta in Myanmar, and also the imperialist control and domination of the US in the Philippines with its pivot to Asia Pacific. So the question is, why are we here with all the problems that we have? What are our hopes? We're here in Belém. Actually, I traveled 48 hours literally from the other side of the globe to join the people's movement, to be here with all of us, to push for the Yasunizing and Ogonizing the world, and to hold big polluters and imperialists accountable for their actions. And we should demand what we urgently need. What we urgently need right now is real, just, and people-centered action now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that you have something you would really like to add about the hopes for us in Belém.
Something I'd like to add?
Yes.
Of course, I always have something to add. Now, when you come to the Conference of Parties like COP30, there are new words that always come up, or old words that are being rephrased, and some of these words bring a lot of confusion. For example, you hear about net zero. Well, we all know that net zero doesn't mean anything, because net zero is not zero. It means polluters can keep polluting, then do something else, as Glenn was mentioning, carbon capture and storage. So you now say, okay, I pollute, but I'm capturing and storing, so I have net zero. But that doesn't tackle the problem, what is creating global warming. It talks about carbon neutrality, talk about decarbonization. Why do we need to decarbonize instead of depetrolizing? We should talk about to depetrolize, stop using fossil fuels, not to use fossil fuels and then capture the carbon. All this is going around in circles and permitting the system to keep dragging us to the brink. We have to take real action. It's like, the way words are used. For example, some war situations are described as conflict, while others are described as genocide. Now, if you describe a war situation as genocide, everybody understands that there's something evil happening there. But if you call it a conflict, say, well, it's a community conflict, two people are fighting there, then you just forget about it, and meanwhile, the same terror is happening. And so that's why we have a term like climate change or global warming. And we do know that it's not global warming, it's global heating. We're in an emergency. But we'll give it a nice term so that we can relax and think that, well, it's warming. Well, how about warming? We all like to have a warmth. So we find these terms to make us forget the real solution. This is an epistemic struggle that we have to engage, countering all these terminologies. And this is why we thought that we must begin to use terms like Yasunize and Ogonize. We don't need to sugarcoat it. What is Yasunize? Copy from the people in Ecuador, keeping the fossils in the ground. What does it mean to Ogonize? The Ogoni people have held up a template for us to learn from. Let's get to the real terminologies that allows us to do the real thing. Talk about climate finance. To me, it's not climate finance, it's climate debt that needs to be paid. So let's give it. Call it the real terminologies so that we can get to the real solutions.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you the very next question, Martins. Some say that Yasunize is just a pie in the sky for countries that are struggling with finances. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the fundamental question we should ask ourselves is why are countries in the global south and in Africa now struggling financially? I think we have to be careful in allowing those who are causing the mess to be the one determining the narrative, you know, and this tells us the reason why we have to, carefully define what development means to us. Development is local. Development should emanate from those in the frontline communities. Development should respect culture. Development should not jettison one's tradition. Unfortunately, those who are causing this mess are forcing the prayer of civility on the African state. And in adhering to this prayer of civility, we are now subjected to adopting templates and recommendations that are even alien to the African state. So the question is, why are we struggling financially in Africa? And the answer is not far-fetched. Some guys came over with their colonialist mentality and start to extract. As we speak right now, what we say in Africa and countries in Africa are only boasting of flag independence. The economy are still subject to the approval or otherwise of entity outside Africa. And this is why development is still far-fetched. It's still far-reached and almost impossible for the African state. And the question, therefore, is, how long shall we continue to subject our development to the interpretation of entities whose interests are even not in the African context or not even African interests? And I'll give you an instance. In Lagos, where I live and come from, a portion of land has been subjected to what they refer to as Lekki Free Trade Zone, 16,000 hectares of land now outside agricultural use. To the government, that's development. That's more money. But this particular land is now ungoverned. Those who are operating in this entity, in this land, don't pay tax. They don't respect the local culture. They don't respect the dignity of the people who are the original landowners. Is that development in the context of development? That's development as the global wants it to be, as the globe wants it to be, and not as people want it to be. So the point is, can we just go back to an age where we define what development means to us as Africa, where we don't have to fly on the wings of gas, where we have to go back to our traditional agricultural means and method of farming, and where our culture are preserved and our livelihood are preserved. So it's not an argument that we can buy into. As Nemo will always say, name a community in the Niger Delta since 1956 that is now flying on the benefits of extractivism. None comes to mind as we speak right now. None comes to mind, not even later. So we have to redefine what this means to us, and it's about us rewriting our curriculum, conscientizing the people, and speaking a language that speaks to our own local development without having to adopt foreign interpretation of what development is.
Thank you very much, Martins. So I'll open the floor for questions. If you have any question or comments, this is the time to ask. While we wait for your question and comment, I would like to ask Nemo this very next question because I do not see any hand at the moment. Okay. There's a hand there.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm Ayola Kasim from Channels TV. So I'm just going to take it from what you said, like a traditional way of life and development and all. Now, in transitioning from first of all, because the African government, for instance, are saying that they need the resource, the finance to move to where they need to be, transitioning away from first of all, like Nigeria. So one wonders, if you're saying we should go back to our traditional way, are we like agricultural system you mentioned? Is it hoe and cutlass that we should do? Or what exactly are you really, what solutions are you proposing for us to do at this point in time? Thank you.
Okay, let me just start. Nemo is here. I think the point I'm making is you and I come from Nigeria, and we have a system or a state that is speaking from both sides of the mouth. Many a times when you look at the policy document of government, today the government wants to fly on the wings of gas. The same government is making investment, insignificant investment in renewable. I also want to quote what Nemo will always say. Our cherished resources stand the risk of becoming stranded, even in the global market. Those who are our natural and our primary buyers are considering alternatives maybe in the next couple of years, you and I will begin to take our crude oil as souvenirs, from parties and birthday events. The point I'm making here is we just have to put on our thinking caps, and begin to invest while it lasts into renewable energy, sources that we are not in short supply of. As a country, there is no state in Nigeria, and I'm speaking for all African countries, where we are in short supply of wind that can power our local homes and industry. We have water bodies that can also do same. We have other alternatives that we can begin to invest in. I'll give you an instance. When you look at National Climate Change Act of 2021 of Nigeria, where you and I come from, Nigeria wants to achieve net zero by 2060. And that document says by 2050. The same government is still investing resources in oil exploration and frontier mining, even in the north. And then another ministry is saying by 2030, we are going to phase out fossil fuel-dependent cars in Lagos State. It doesn't really make sense when you have these policy somersaults and policy inconsistency. And it boils to the fact that some of these things we are now, projecting as alternatives are actually thrown at us by interests and foreign entities that don't have any other interest than to keep Nigeria and Africa in a state of subserviency.
All right, let me just add a little bit to that. He has exhausted the, very exhaustive answer. But one thing, when we're speaking about Ogonize and Yasunize and Depollute, well, we have in mind that 70% of the food that we eat is produced by small-scale farmers using hoes and machetes. That was feeding the world, not the industrial farmers. Industrial farms with genetically engineered crops and so on, they feed the factories. So we need to keep the soil healthy. And this means keeping the fossils in the ground, and it means decommissioning and dismantling and restoring the land so that we can have healthy soils to produce healthy foods. If you don't have healthy soils, healthy water bodies, you keep polluting with crude oil, with gas, and then, of course, you can't have healthy food, and you can't have a healthy population. So the real investment is in keeping the fossils in the ground. And you know what? Keeping the fossils in the ground will also spark up economic activities, because the local people will be employed in cleaning up the land. As we are seeing in Ogonize already, women are producing mangrove seedlings. They're involved in the planting of the seedlings, and this is triggering economic development. So Yasunizing and Ogonizing is actually a wake-up call, and they actually can wake up our people.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask this one last question to all three of you. In 1 minute, I want you to tell me, how do we define success when it comes to restoration? Is it just about the environment bouncing back, or is it also about healing the social wounds caused by environmental damage? So Kling, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Drawing from the inspiration of the Yasuni and the Ogoni people, through collective action, we can stop the rape of our lands, water, and forests. There can be no restoration and healing if there's business as usual. If this still continues, there can be only healing and restoration if the land and resources are in the hands of the people. As what one of our speakers were saying, there should be a robust community ownership to be able to have a successful community action. We should dismantle the unjust social structures that we are in that puts the marginalized people, the vulnerable people, oppressed. And this is what just transition is all about. The power should lie in the hands of the people. There should be right to self-determination for the indigenous peoples and all the communities. Thank you.
Two things. Number one, as Glenn just said, listen to the voices of the grassroots of the people. That's when just transition will be just. Number two, respect the rights of nature. If you keep on seeing nature as something to be transformed, to be damaged, to be destroyed, to be appropriated, then of course we're not going to get to the right solution.
To me, success will be to acknowledge historical damages done and commit not to do same again. It's not just water becoming clean, but it's water remaining clean. It's not just tree growing again, but trees allowing to grow and to grow again. It's about respecting the rights and dignity of the people and not just saying yes to suggestions above our heads.
Thank you very much. For us just to know that the Ogonize and the Yasunize campaign is not just about saving trees. They are about fixing our broken relationship with the planet and with each other. Justice isn't something that we add on later. It's the foundation that we build. And on this note, we say a very big thank you to you for being part of this press conference, which was organized by Health of Moderates Foundation and All Watch International. Thank you very much.